And one. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good day, good night, wherever you are in the world. I am PL Stewart. I am very privileged to have an incredible guest. Some of you may know her through her booktube channel, Erin. Um, some of you may know her as a brilliant academic from the University of Manitoba. Regardless, I have the privilege of having Dr. Erin Keating join me today for Six Elementals interview. Thank you so much, Doctor, for coming.
Well, thank you, PL. And please, Erin, for this is definitely preferable. I actually, even amongst my students, unless we're in the first year level, I try to very quickly break them of that. But yeah, no, thanks for having me on. I'm very excited to chat. I've watched a couple of your past videos when you've had people on that I've been watching their booktube channels and stuff. So I'm very excited to be here.
Well, thanks so much. So excited to have you. I think I was. It's funny. I was when prior to the first time we interacted on a live, which I believe was on Philip's channel for and a guy Gabriel K book discussion with Aaron Nerd Level Nerd Writer and Philip and yourself and myself, and it was about the Fionavar tapestry. I think that was the last book, if I'm not mistaken, that we were discussing. And I remember, because I'm the kind of person, because I do interviews, I do research on anybody that I'm interacting with, and I had seen that, you did your undergrad at Laurier, which is where two of my children have gone to school and have degrees from now. So it's kind of that communal. Okay, so she knows what that little box, that square few kilometers of Laurier looks like, right? So
Yeah, I have great memories from there. I loved that school. That was a great place to do an undergrad back in the day. I'll just keep that vague in terms of when back in the day was.
yeah, and I went to York, and it's funny. I always tell this story with it's totally. I laugh about it because at the time I was like, but so my oldest daughter, when she'd applied for various universities, and she got into, I think, York, U of T, or a few other schools, and I was like, because being a proud dad, you're thinking, oh, maybe she'll go to York. She wants to do law, Osgood, blah, blah, blah. And then she kind of almost patted me on the head, and she's like, oh, dad, an A at York is like a B at U of T. I'm going to U of T. So
Oh, ouch.
you're going to the enemy. Well, not the enemy. I mean, come on. Just getting a degree anywhere is phenomenal. But all joking aside, so part of my introduction to really appreciating what academia brought to literature was when I went to school, and my daughter, who of course was taking undergrad law, compared to me, who was taking like literature and history and things like that. Um, Her saying that, Dad, I never appreciated professors as much as when I took courses in law where the professors wrote the textbooks, right? And it was, but she said, I also gained an appreciation for the first time of the difference between academic and scholarly writing and like fiction writing, speculative fiction writing, and like what goes into like writing an academic book. It's a lot. And she said, like I always wondered if my daughter and I, we talk a lot about things like this. And back then she said, I wonder if these professors could write like a really cool fiction novel. I said, I'm sure some of them have or thought about it, right?
Yeah.
But what one of the things that drew me to your channel was how you combine, both worlds. You bring both worlds together. I think that's one of the reasons why you're so popular, if you'll forgive my very unexpert analysis of that, right? So, you'll talk about like nerd culture, you'll be in cosplay, and you'll talk about gaming and like fandoms, and then you'll because you have this love and appreciation and understanding, deep understanding of these complex literary books, but you meld them together like so seamlessly, right? Like that's, I think, one of the reasons why you're so well respected and so popular. But why did you decide to do it? Like, why did you decide to take the book tube? Like, why was that the form you used to do that?
Yeah, the short answer is because it terrified me, but there is a longer answer. Because I have this habit of doing things that I just scare me, so why not do them? But, like, the longer answer is that so during lockdown, right, certainly it was, like it was moving to online teaching was incredibly difficult, and so it took a lot of work and a lot of preparation and completely revisioning, like, classes and whatnot. Um, but I started making videos for that, right? So that the students would have like bite-sized lectures, and then when we got together on Zoom, we could talk about those, but like they could watch those as like part of their reading time sort of deal. So I started to get comfortable with that medium and saw what it could do. And at the same time, I got into Malazin. Right? And so I started watching, I got, like, the Gardens of the Moon, I read that, and it was part of, like Tor was doing a free monthly book club at that point, so that's actually how I got Gardens of the Moon, and then ended up, like, of course, buying them all. Um, but then I discovered Philip Chase and Critical Dragon and their Malazan, like, discussions, and between those 2 things, I was like, "Well, I'm sort of partially doing this, maybe I could sort of continue." And so once we were back on campus and I wasn't having to do it as that, I did sort of start missing the videos. So I thought maybe I'd try doing it and seeing how it worked. And like my tastes have always been everything. Like I'm just interested in whatever sort of thrown at me. It's a blessing and a curse of being an ADHD academic. And there seems to be a lot of us neurodivergent folk in academia for whatever reason. But, so I am interested in all the things, and I just figure that other people might want to know just the wide variety of things that I spend my time thinking about. Um, and I also just got into video editing. I'm still terrible at it, but it's fun. It's just neat to do, and it's just a very, like, technical, almost meditative because you get super absorbed in sort of that practice. So I really enjoy that aspect of it as well.
Well, we're very blessed that you decided to take the plunge and do that. I guess I'm curious, because obviously you're someone dedicated to lifelong learning. I think many of us who engage in the bookish community, that's one of the things that we strive for is learning, right? I mean, yes, we're reading to be entertained, and we're reading for all kinds of reasons, but I think learning is one aspect I know that I look for in what I get out of reading. What have you learned from doing booktube specifically, and melding those two things together that I spoke of?
Um, uh, on a very practical level, I learned that, wow, booktubers, like, it's a ton of work. Like, it takes and I now teach, like, video essays as an assignment for some of my classes just to, like, make students appreciate that those things they're watching, like, it's not easy. That is hours upon hours upon hours of that person's time for that 20-minute video, for instance, right? And so that was really and learning those skills and learning all that, that was part of it on the one hand, which is why videos are I upload them a lot more slowly than perhaps I would like because, it's like one small part of my overall job, and more of yeah, anyway, we'll get to that. But I think also I'm learning that so I'm a very I don't like attention, which makes it sound strange for a booktuber and or a teacher for that matter. I've always been more of a facilitator, and so trying to translate that into like booktubing and making videos and stuff like that. It has been really interesting because I don't think I'm there yet, but I'm trying very hard to sort of find ways to somehow be the one making the videos, but not make them all about me, right? To like bring and I think BookTube actually does that really well. And I'm still experimenting with how to do that in terms of bringing people in and making space for people in those communities and making them want to be there. But that I think is what's so attractive about BookTube for me is community. And that's something as an introvert I've always struggled with, but it's something I'm really trying to like learn about and be part of in like the ways that I can.
And that's absolutely wonderful to hear. And I think certainly your reputation is being very kind, very warm, and very, very, very wanting to embrace everyone and make everyone feel comfortable. And I'm curious, and I think that's a reputation you certainly, from what I understand, your students, that's your students' opinion of you is that, and so is your audience. I'm wondering, do any of your students or your colleagues, your academic colleagues, watch your channel, and do they give you like feedback or?
Not so much my colleagues. They're aware of it. If they watch it, they haven't told me. But certainly some of my students do. And so like I have a PhD student currently, and I know she watches my stuff. She's like wonderfully supportive. And she's actually, I mean, I don't know how comfortable she is sort of sharing her channel, but she actually has her own channel because she's a vidder, and does beautiful like videos and whatnot. Like she's actually the one who taught me all the basics of editing with this project we did. So yeah, I get some things from my students, and I certainly try to, when I can, like bring them not so much to my videos, but, although they know they exist, but to bring in relevant like other booktuber videos if there's something that's relevant to what we're doing in the class, right? To make those connections.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, I mean, maybe perhaps offline, if you're comfortable, you can point me towards your channel, and I'll check it out for sure. So it's funny. Like I have so many. I subscribe to so many people on YouTube. I only get to a certain percentage, even of those that subscribe to. You know how it is, right? But
Yep.
there's some that are like must watches now. You become one of them. Philip Chase,
Thank you.
Joanna Reed's, um, there's about maybe 15 to 20 that I try to get to at least one video regularly every week or two. So but again, I love what you do on booktube. And I want to talk about you mentioned books like Malazan was one of the kind of the foundational books that got you into wanting to discuss and chat and analyze and do these breakdowns, these deep thematic breakdowns, and the things that you do. And one of the things you did, for example, if I'm, and you please correct me about what the video was about. It was essentially like you were looking at Malazan through like the lens of like uh, queer reproduction, queer theory, like was when you look at the kind of content that is on booktube in general. Um, when it comes to the academic discourse and marrying that to like these themes, and that maybe it's perhaps a viewpoint that some people may not have looked at the series from. um do you find that, again, we talk about learning, that you learn a lot from exploring a topic a certain way about a book?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I mean, one of, if I can sort of go back to maybe my choice in terms of doing that for my channel, like one of the reasons when I was thinking about venturing into this was I knew I was A, never going to be able to have the regular output, and B, not really going to be able to like sustain a booktube channel on like reviews or my personality. Like that's just not, and also I don't actually really like doing reviews. It's not my thing. And they have value and I like to watch them sometimes, right? But it's not the way I think about books. And so I thought like what I could bring to it was like I've always been very heavily interested in critical theory and stuff that often is very much in relation to popular culture, but doesn't always, is sometimes sort of more confined to the academy. Like it doesn't often come into popular culture. And so a big thing for me is trying to make those types of like dense theories accessible, right? Through like, okay, here's this like one concept, say from like a Sarah Ahmed, like talking about perhaps like queer or disorientation, which was like one of the things I talked about in that first conversation video that I did with my student Anastasia. And so having like a little bit of the theorist, but having it more about like it's about the book that we've all read, and look how this lets us see these different things about the book that we wouldn't necessarily see without this lens. And I love that. Like that's the way, I think that's one of the reasons I stayed in academia, is that's the way I've always sort of read. Like I always have a very idiosyncratic attention, I guess, in terms of what I notice about particular books and whatnot. Like, for example, when I did the video about the Malazan table, like, it's just because I was obsessed with the table, and I just had to get that out because, like, tables are interesting, and that particular table is just wild, and it's I don't think it's something necessarily that, a reader of Malazan would get stuck on the way, like, my brain got stuck on it.
Well, I think that it's fascinating that, because I think, Malazan is a book, is a series. The Book of the Fall. Sorry for all you. Please, I don't want the Malazan purists to have want me me burned in effigy. That we're speaking of Stephen Erickson specifically, Malazan Book of the Fallen,
Yes.
and I often make the mistake that Malazan is more than that. There's Ian C. Esselmont's books.
Yes.
When I say Malazan, please forgive me. I'm referring specifically to the Malazan Book of the Fallen by Steve Erickson. So please, Malazan fans, don't don't get mad at me. So
Put away your pitchforks.
yeah, exactly. But so when we talk about a book, a series like Malazan, of course, extremely popular, extremely well known. I mean, an absolutely, you know, avid fan base that lives and dies on every character, and it's just it's is it intimidating to tackle, and in regards from what perspective, anything you say about a series like Malazan can draw potentially criticism the way you announce it, and not by virtue of anything you've done. It's just that because there's so many passionate fans that just they love this series so much, for example, and they it's like a worship and adoration of and respect for the author and the craft and the series that they do. Were you ever a bit nervous about how you were going to approach speaking about any of these series with these massive followings?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, no, it was definitely very scary, and it's funny because I think I made a video about it before I even was brave enough to ever post on the Malazan subreddit, right? And even now with the Malazan subreddit, I find it quite stressful to like, I try to engage because obviously, like, you have to if you want community, you have to be community, right? Like, I feel like that's a really important principle, that, people can struggle with. So I do try to contribute to the Malazan subreddit when there's like stuff that I feel like I can. But I always like I find that intensely stressful um, for some reason. But in terms of the videos, I was definitely very scared, but people have been wonderful. Like it really, like the comments have been really generous, and very like interested in it. Like there's not a lot of them, but like it's not about a lot for me. I mean, I have a full-time job. Like I love doing this, but I like, you know, I'm doing it as like extra as bonus, right? And to hopefully share like things that legitimately I love, like things that I'm legitimately a fan of. And that is actually a very important part of the channel for me to be a place to actually be a part of a fandom in a way that I wasn't really growing up, pre ubiquity of the internet and whatnot. Um, but yeah, I was pretty scared and I still get nervous. I mean, I have one that I'm currently editing on No Life Forsaken, which is the second book of
Yeah,
the Witness trilogy. And I'm a bit nervous about that one. We'll see. We'll see what people think. But I think it really helped me, and I am so grateful for this. In that, I don't remember if it was my first video, although I think it was. Erickson himself commented on it. And I think like that, as you mentioned, like in Malazan in particular, this isn't true of all fandoms, but in Malazan, Erickson's voice is revered, right? Like
yes,
what he says really matters, and people are always like linking to interviews and bringing back comments and linking to like the problem with Karsa essays and like he's such a big presence in that community that I think his interest in the video and then his sort of like not something I thought of, but this is really interesting like endorsement went a long way with the people watching it and the other fans. So I was really grateful for his generosity in doing that because that
yeah.
was just really kind of him.
Yeah, he is amazing, and so many people in the community, including the authors themselves, are just wonderful, wonderful people. And hey, can't help doing the plug here. Go Canada, because we were talking at backstage a bit about Canadian authors, and I mean, I mentioned this earlier on another live. I can't remember who we were speaking to, which one. This is my third one today, but I
Oh,
had
wow.
said that Canadians in general, we have this reputation of being very self-effacing and modest, and we don't brag about accomplishments and our celebrities, and a lot of people who are famous, people would otherwise attribute their nationality to being from the UK or America or whatever. However, they're Canadian. So we have the R. Scott Bakers and the Stephen Ericas, the Margaret Atwoods, and you name it. And was it, oh, they're Canadian, like because but they are.
Thank
And
you, they are.
I think I'm starting to, as I continue my journey in this space, that to really be proud and remember, yeah, they're did you know they're Canadian? And you get that, really? And almost, are you sure? And yeah, read their bio, they're Canadian. And smart, educated, literate people sometimes aren't aware of, and not that it's important, but they're not aware of where the person's from. And it's like, wow, that's and so there's a lot of great Canadian authors out there, and in
Including yourself. We have to throw in there. I mean, I did in prep for this, like as you say, you did research when we were having the funeral conversation, but in prep for this, I read the first book of
oh
your
my gosh,
series, which I
what?
thoroughly enjoyed. I'm definitely planning on reading more
Oh my
as I have
gosh.
time to fit in the fun reading. But like, no, I really enjoyed it. Although it was very funny, I will say, as like the first couple of chapters, I was very like, I hope I'm not supposed to like this person at this moment. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I'm not. I think it's
No,
pretty
you're
clearly
not.
telegraphed that I'm not, but I just like I was a little worried, and then as it went on, I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm on board. I see what's going on. This is a lot of fun.
Oh my gosh. Like when you said you, like my heart started going like this, like, oh my gosh, like because I think it's one of those things where, and thank you so much. I'm so honored that
Of
you would
course.
check out my book. I'm very humbled. I'm glad you liked it. I feel like it is different when, like, when you write a book, you don't know who's going to read it.
Yeah.
The first thing when I realized that, oh, I might have a little something, and I'm a very unknown, unheralded author, a little indie author who has a small, dedicated following that I'm so appreciative and I love. But most people will never know my name. It's when the people beyond your wife, your kids, your friend, your work colleagues, your friends, when they start reading your books, like when you check your sales numbers and someone in Amazon, Australia, or Lazy Bar, you're like, someone from there, like they bought my book, and then you see them buy the second or third book. You're like, oh my gosh, like, so someone's actually reading it that I don't know, that will have things to say about it. And you see reviews coming in, and I just found that that's one of the most wonderful, also scary experiences as an author. But I will also say, though, that I think it's just natural that when really readers that and readers are intelligent, readers are, regardless of background or education, whatever, but when someone who's a really discerning reader, like someone like yourself, who's read and talked to people like Guy Gavriel, there's that little nervous thing going on. So like, oh my gosh, like, Erin Keating read my book, like, but thank you for the kind words. It
Of
means a lot.
course. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I will definitely be continuing on the
Oh,
series.
I am so honored. But I think you have, again, we talked about, you've done these analysis on books far more well known than mine, including authors. This one really interests me. The Erickson one stood out, and definitely the one you did on N.K. Jemisin, another world renowned author, probably one of the most decorated fantasy authors of her generation. You showed how modern authors were, like, they were. I think it was more about deconstructing and subverting traditional tropes, right? Like,
Mhm.
of the more Eurocentric, medieval settings. And I think one thing I very much get out of your your videos and what you do is that you like to look at how fantasy, how really and truly perhaps there's a layer beneath that we're not exploring, how it breaks away from a lot of the traditional lenses. And I just want to ask you about that. Is that something that it's more purposeful, the way you examine it that way, you examine them that way?
I think so, because it's very like I love sort of just all fantasy. I mean, I grew up reading fantasy, well, having fantasy read to me, and then as soon as I could reading it myself. And very much secondary world fantasy, sort of specifically. That was always my thing. And so I enjoy, ones that allow me to just that do the tropes well, that satisfy the tropes. But in terms of a critical practice, I really enjoy looking at the authors and thinking through the ones who are subverting particular tropes, often for sort of like political in a very sort of broad sense, not in a partisan sense, like reasons. Because and mainly that's because like with everything I do, I'm fascinated by sort of ideology critiques. So I'm like fascinated by the ways that there's all of these beliefs that we don't examine, we don't think about, we just work within. And I feel like in a lot of ways, genre works in that same way, which is why I sort of like bringing those together. And so there's this frame that we work within that often goes unexamined. And I really love the fantasy authors that examine it. And either through their world building or through just like certain characters or their relationship to the genre. Like there's so many different ways you can do that. And of course, N.K. Jemisin is a great example because like she's like again, like me, such a fan of fantasy and secondary world fantasy and grew up reading it. And yet, of course, as she said, like she loved it, but was also always disappointed with it because where was she in it? Right? Like where and I love that she, took that and was like, well, I'm just gonna write my own. Like that's and thank you, right? Because those are all of her I've read all of her novels at this point, and they are just brilliant books and I absolutely love them. But like that is what I like. I like drawing out sometimes stuff that's intentional on the part of the author, and then sometimes that I think is not necessarily intentional, but it's a product of that frame they were in when they were writing it, if you will. So like their particular context, their like what they were thinking about, but also, and I think this is important and doesn't get enough credit, realizing what readers might bring to it, right? Like, because like once the author writes it, it's gone, right? It's out of their control, right? And certainly like well, I had this just experience with Last Light of the Sun, which I read when it came out it's by Gabrielle Kay. And I read this when it came out in 2004, I want to say. It was the early aughts, right? Um, and I was actually like taking a break from academia at this point between degrees. I was, whatever, reading for pleasure or whatnot. And it didn't grab me. Like it actually was quite a disappointment in comparison to his other novels, which I loved. Like I grew up reading Kay. Um, but coming back to it now, knowing a little bit more about the history that it's based on and being sort of in a different frame and understanding more about genre and like particularly like gender politics in that particular one and all of these things, and actually politics of like settler colonialism, which are like it's and like sort of religious expansion and that sort of stuff and its role in it, like it was so much more rich. Like I enjoyed it so much more. And like that's on me. Like same book, like 22 years apart from doing the math quickly, but I was in such a different place. And so that I love that. That fascinates me. And I like hearing, also from my students how they are coming to things and what they're bringing to what we're reading, because it completely opens up the way you read.
Though those are all exceptional points. It's funny. I initially had the same reaction specifically to Last Light of the Sun, but only for the first third, perhaps, that I felt like, okay, everything I've read by Guy Gavrique is, and I too am starting. I think I'll probably dispense one day the whole 5-star rating thing, but it's the best way to describe how, for me, like in a quick, like just succinctly, how much I love his books. All of his books are 5-star, essentially, if you will lose it. but for me, and the only difference is some are like off the scale, like more towards 6, 7, 8 stars, and some are 5 star. But not, so I still felt that that book, Last Lesson, was, but I wasn't completely like hooked until the more the third, when basically, when the analogous to the British showed up, the Alfred the Great
Yeah, the
church,
Anglican.
like the
Yeah,
Anglican, like when the Anglican showed up, that's when I was really, and just the interweaving of the plot lines, that's when I
mhm,
really got hooked. But that said, though, I think you nailed it, Erin, in that, you know when we have the, um frankly, I always say, like, not that I'm a good writer, but whatever craft I have, I owe that largely to my life experience. I don't feel I could have written the books that I have as well as I have now, were it not for, publishing in my 50s, right?
yeah,
And I think that the amalgam, of my life has, and my life experiences and what they've been, especially working in law enforcement, things like that, have made me the writer that I am. And that, had I not had those experiences, I don't think I could write a book with the, hopefully, some of the credibility that I've written it with. So I honestly, that goes for reading as well. That the lens you look at, reading when you're a lot younger reader, that when I was a younger reader, is totally different from the lens I'm looking at books from now. But sometimes, even irrespective of age, sometimes it can be very much about just simply reading a book, absorbing it, putting it down, and rereading it even a year later or 2 years later. And
yeah.
and of course, yes, you can evolve and change a lot in just a short span. But I even think that sometimes it's just, you miss things, or you don't
Yes.
capture things on a first read, that on a reread, that you simply, wow, you can say. And I would say, especially with books that are thematically deep, or, and like, I would, I did a reread of one of my favorite book of the Malaza Book of the Fall, which is Toll the Hounds. And I was so caught up, and I was so overwhelmingly moved and touched by the themes, especially the theme of grief. And as most people know, Steve Erickson was unfortunately, dealing with the death of his father when he wrote that. And that book just made me sob. I was just in, it just brought me to an emotional place. And I think that's why I loved it so much. But when I reread the book, I was so caught up in the character of Rake and everything surrounding him, that I actually missed a lot of really poignant and amazing stuff with some of the secondary characters that I normally would focus on, right?
Yes.
So it's just, and that was like, a year and a half maybe between the reread. So I mean, even sometimes it's just simply, okay, to give space and to put something down, and all the things that you get after you reread something, it's just incredible,
Yeah.
right?
Well, no, yeah, I absolutely agree. And I say, like, in terms of the young versus sort of older reader thing too, also, I also want to emphasize, like, both are so valuable. Like, I don't think, like, they're different, but that's not to, like, prioritize one over the other. But in terms of rereadings, particularly complex novels, like when you're talking about someone like Erickson, or Kay, or like a lot of the literature that's more like realist literature that I teach, like the reasons that these things get taught over and over and over again is because every time you come back to them, there's something new, right? They're so complex, they're so layered, they're so like it is there, right? So I like to think of it as a sort of like a play between like the author and the reader and both of their contexts. Like there's all of these things. And that for me is what makes a good book. Is it rereadable? Right?
Yeah.
Is it something that I
Yes.
can come back to that I'm going to see in a different way or notice different details or these sorts of things, right?
That's an excellent point. Because again, I mentioned before, we read books for all kinds of reasons. There are books I think that a lot of us simply read for entertainment value, escapism,
Mhm.
fine, and then it's great, and then it's like you read it and it's not going to resonate with you, other than at the moment you needed a lot of people like to use the term palate cleanser or whatever, just to, I've been reading a lot of heavy stuff. I'm going to read this. It's light, it's funny, it's humorous, and I'm gonna great, and it doesn't, and then you're on to the next. But I think, yeah, the books that my shelf is full of books that are reread worthy, are books that, the ones I invest in, that I actually want a physical copy, that I can lose myself in the pages over and over again. on various reads are those are the physical books, on my shelf and full of gag. Okay, of course, he has his own shelf now. So I want to quickly put up the wonderful booktuber Brad Miller. Hey, Brad, thanks for coming out. Yeah, another one. Yeah, another live today. This is 3 or 4. They're just been so amazing. All these guests are just absolutely fabulous. I'm very blessed to do this. So, but thanks, Brad, for coming out. He says, have to do from time to time of writing historical fantasy to do with the Templars and Crusades. Oh, it's one of the things he delved into. Now, Brad is an awesome booktuber, and he is writing a book. So, Brad, I'm very, very, very excited, and congratulations again on the novel. And I cannot wait to read it. So, he says, have thought. That's he's correct himself. Yeah, and the bar starts spelling. Let's see, right at the same time. Yeah, and we know how that is. So many books, so little time for rereads. But yes, some are needed. Some are just reread worthy.
Yeah.
That's just the long and the short of it, right? So one thing I was curious about, Erin, is that so from what I've read, most of your academic research is focused on 17th century theater and like celebrity studies and print culture and things like that. So when you consider that aspect of your academic, your scholastic life, is that something that lends itself easily to I mean, and again, I've always said you do this great job of this balance, right? You marry like nerd culture with like these literary masterpieces, and but is that something that's easy to basically get people interested in on a booktube channel to talk about, to expand on, to make it like really interesting in terms of the content?
Um, I think I sort of actually feel like different videos of different audiences potentially a little bit for me, although I do hope to figure out eventually how to give more of an overlap there because I do, at least in my mind, everything I do is very interrelated. Like I don't view these things as like separate fields in any way. To me, they just make sense. And I often, like I'm prepping a class right now that is about actually like fan studies and celebrity culture. And goes right from that like 17th century theater all the way up to like the heated rivalry fandom. Right? So it's because I think that they are connected. I mean, and that's what I'm hoping to try to make some more videos sort of showing, like how knowing about, this particular actor from the 17th century or this particular like book that is written about her is actually really helpful for thinking about things that are happening right now, right? And so I don't think I'm making that case convincingly yet, but it's definitely on my like goals to try to bring that together because to my mind it makes sense. Like they absolutely are related. Knowing about one helps us understand sort of very much like where these ideas came from, how they originated, why celebrity is very much on a model of consumption and how did that come about and what are the dynamics of it and just all of those sorts of things. Um, so yeah, I am hoping to bring more of that into things because now it is very much on the contemporary like fantasy and a little bit of comics, a little bit of Bridgerton sort of things because it's also directed by what my students are doing sometimes, right?
Wow,
um,
that's incredible.
but yeah, it is, and it's like I need to put a pitch out there for those of you who maybe are skeptical about this. But knowing about when we're talking about Anglo-American culture, right? When we're talking about like Britain, Canada, the States, knowing about the restoration in 18th century, so the late 17th into the 18th century, like I'm not going to say that's the origins of things because I'm very anti-origins. That in itself is, I think, a problematic concept. But a lot of the things that structure our society in both in terms of law, in terms of just dominant practices, social mores, the way we understand sexuality, the way we understand gender, the way we understand race, all of these things, origins in the Restoration 18th century. Like they really sort of started to take the shape we recognize at that time. And so it's so neat to see the way things might have gone, right? Like, because it wasn't it wasn't necessarily obvious that we were going to define um, sexuality based on the gender of the object, right? Like that's not necessarily, there's no determining factor for that. It happened, and so it is a determining factor, like in our society, but it's not like there's any sort of like essential reason for that. It's very much like cultural. So yeah, I love that period is so important for all of those things.
Do we as a society, especially Western society, do you think we spend enough time understanding the origins of where things came from through literature? Because a common complaint from many spheres of society is that literacy is declining. We're not reading enough. What we're reading is certainly not, for the most part, academic, and not that it has to be, but we're not taking lessons from history, for example. We're not understanding what goes into the nuts and bolts of why, as you said, why we have evolved a certain way and why we do certain things. But of course, you're in academia and you're trying to help them. Like you're in the camp that's trying to change that through your work, right? But are we doing as good a job as we could have as a society at addressing that? Because I think, I always say, and I'm a big history buff, like medieval literature and English was my major and history is my minor.
Oh, nice.
And I am a big history buff, and I am always just astounded by, and I write about this, that everything that I have read in terms of texts that predate, the modern novel, um, and especially history, like, there's so much that you would ask yourself, are we in a time loop? Because this happened 500 years ago here, or this happened 800 years ago here, or this happened 3 centuries ago, and we're doing this again, really? Like what? And so, what do you think about that? Like,
I think it's depressing, frankly. But I do think it's a massive problem with the education system, because I actually think people want to read. People want to learn. People like it, that's why you get a lot of my students who end up in an English literature class. They end up there because they read for fun first. Like it wasn't, and luckily their K-12 schooling didn't beat that love out of them, which in some ways, like it can, right? And I do think that I mean, obviously, I don't study pedagogy, but I do think that a lot of the structures of our early education, and particularly in the States, is what's causing these problems, right? Like, 'cause it's almost like it's not too late when you hit university, but university still, I think, really unfortunately only gets a small part of the population, right? Not everyone has the ability to go to university. Not everyone wants to, right? And that makes sense. That's fine. But because of that, I think there should be other avenues, and pop culture can fill that sometimes in a way, but it's also dangerous, right? Because, like, pop culture has a tendency to reflect the current beliefs onto the past in a way that can be weaponized. Like, I just think about the way, like, white supremacists use the medieval era, right? Like, a lot of what they seem to think is true of the medieval era, wrong, like, not actually accurate at all, right? But because of these more popular tellings made by white creators, that, like, allows that, right? So I do think that, um, we need to do better, particularly in K-12 education, and we need to make reading fun, and if that means, like, getting rid of homework, that means that, like, I don't I use an ungrading system. Like, I don't do grading within the term because I want it to be very interest driven. I want it to be like I want the students to want to do it well, not to want to get a good grade, right? And I think that makes a ton of difference if you're encouraging people in what they're interested in and, like, using that as the starting point for education. Because people are interested in things. Like we tend to be cynical and be like, oh, well, then no one will want to do any work. That's not true. Look around you. Look at BookTube. Like we have a ton of what I forget the name. I think Matt Hales calls like scholar fans, but basically, or fan scholars, like people who are fans, but then self-educate
yes.
and like they might have gone to university for science or something, right? Like they haven't studied it, but they're just it's interest driven. And like there are some like just fantastic voices on YouTube doing that, right? And I think that just puts the lie to you need to force people to learn. No, you don't. You just have to give them the tools to follow their interests.
I totally agree. My mother, 91. Love you, mom. If you watch this at some point, she's 91. Reading is the one main passion that she's able to do now on a regular basis that she can do because of her age and stuff. And she's always been a voracious reader. She introduced me to a love of reading and writing as well. She never went to high school. She was one of seven, and a lot of her responsibility, back in the West Indies, would take care of her younger siblings. And but she's one of the most literate and well-read people I read. She's devoured books of every type and scope, and like yeah, it doesn't take a formal education, which is potentially inaccessible to some people. It doesn't take yeah, it literally just takes a love of, it's like anything else. If you enjoy it, you can do it. And once you have the skills to be able to do it, then to read, then again you can. And I love what you said there is that, so much of it is about the will and the intent, and that you don't need to have a PhD to 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 have a deep understanding of literature, right?
Yep.
Which is something that I think booktube definitely reinforces, right? So
And if anything, what you just need is a community. And that's like, I know that I'm definitely not a yay, social media is all golden and lovely and whatnot. It certainly has its problems, but I do think it is fantastic for that, right? For those who are actually able to use it to find community, to learn from others, to generate that excitement and interest, like in new things, like that. We are actually incredibly lucky to be sort of part of this change in technology and to find ways to use it to like just to actually sort of be outside, just what education tells us is important,
yeah,
right? Maybe we like something else, and there's a whole bunch of other people who like it too, and that becomes like a place for learning, right? As well as enjoyment and fun.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I just want to quick to get to it. Is this a relative, Jennifer Keating, 1907?
Yep, that would be my sister.
Well, fantastic. Hey, Jennifer, thanks so much for joining and coming out, saying hello. She says, I've never reread books, but my opinion on this has changed while taking part in the GGKR Reading Challenge. Oh, so you took part in that, eh? Fantastic. Yeah, and she also says, okay, it's definitely worth it. Absolutely, absolutely. And Brad echoes those sentiments. He says, Jennifer, and you've had the opportunity, Erin, to actually have Guy Gabriel Kay come to, I guess, University of Manitoba is his alma mater, and he's come there at your behest, and he's given talk stuff. What was that like? That must have been fantastic.
It was great. Yeah, it was lovely. And I do have to say, it's with someone like Kate, it definitely wasn't just a me reaching out to him sort of invitation. Like our arts communications and our dean and our faculty were all sort of involved in making that happen, and bringing him in and whatnot. But it was incredible, right? Because it was like we had been studying his book in the class. We did this. I did the summer tree with that fantasy class just because I knew he'd be coming, and so both like to hear his talk, to meet him. Like, of course, we went out to dinner with some of the grad students who are studying fantasy and got a chance to, talk to him about like sports fandoms, but also like his view of fantasy and just like a range, right, of a lot of things. Just so generous with his time. Like, that's actually one of the things I really noticed. So we had this public talk, and there was like an official Q&A afterward, but it ended up being quite short because, of course, you've got time constraints for everyone. But he stuck around afterwards and just talked to anyone who wanted to approach him and like signed books, even though there was no like sort of official book signing. And we'd had like a little sort of impromptu giveaway of one of his most recent novel, and then he signed that for the person like who won the novel. And like even like one of my students, I loved this, brought her dad to the talk because her dad was a huge K fan, so he talked to them for like a little while. And it was lovely. And it's funny because we definitely don't see eye to eye on everything, Kay and I, particularly around like fandoms and fan fiction and whatnot. But I was just struck by how generous he was with his time and just how much the students, and this is one of the reasons I do it, even though it's like a lot of work to bring in authors, even if it's via Zoom, like they just, to see the person who actually wrote the book they're reading and talking about in class and to be able to talk to them about writing. And of course, many of them are aspiring authors themselves. Um, it's an experience that is so valuable to them, and there's no other way you can get it, right, than to have that. And so I was so happy that he did that. And of course, Erickson has zoomed in to one of my classes as well and come once for sort of an informal dinner with a couple of the students. And again, it's just like it's fabulous. I always love when these authors like generously give their time just to enrich sort of students' experience of their work.
That is incredible. And you mentioned too, which is another fantastic point, that and I'm sure all of us have our issues with social media, but things like being able to speak to an author or a fellow booktuber or a reader, anyone like halfway around the world, right? And to have a discussion with, you know uh like I said, the first time I had the pleasure of having a chat with you was with Philip and Evan, and Evan's in Spain. So like that's one distinct advantage I believe that booktube and the booktube community has brought. It's brought people from all different sorts of backgrounds, countries, and the ability to condense your thoughts in a video, and also things like vlogs where they can see, hey, I'm here in the middle of the desert, right? And I'm broadcasting live, reading this book, in an oasis, right? Like, I mean, it's that kind of thing that that's what the power of the internet and social media can do, that you couldn't do before, right?
Yeah.
And for example, if there's that stereotype of the reclusive writer, that they don't do public appearances, all that, but they can simply sit in their own living room and broadcast, hey, this is my new book that's happening, and or engage with their readers. And I just think that's one of the positives of the booktube space.
Yeah, absolutely. It's made things a lot more accessible to sort of, uh, and of course, there's still issues, but yeah, compared to when we were all talking about like in-person events and that's it, like it's just wildly, wildly more accessible now, mostly to the good.
Yeah, but it must be been so special to be part of that and to facilitate that in-person event, and to have the author come in and speak to your students and just hang out, and like that's awesome. I just think
Yeah.
that's awesome stuff. I'm going to put up. Oh, yes. Thanks, Brad. You say 2 words: culture, class, and business wise. At least your first Strong Kingdom book, almost done reading. Oh, thank you, Brad. I hope you're enjoying it. Yep, definitely a clash of cultures and a fight for survival of one culture that may or may not potentially deserve to survive. I think some would argue, but yes, thank you for that. And oh, thanks, Brad. He says he's loving the convo, the thoughts,
Well, thank you.
and Jennifer, oh, so kind. Thank you. Jennifer says,
Well, she has to say that.
yeah, she's your sister. She better say that. And yeah, oh, the big, yeah, agreed. Yeah, you're so lucky. So lucky that way, Erin. Yeah, to get to pick, an intellect like GGK's. That must have been, fabulous. And like I know you said, obviously, yeah, you're not you said, yeah, you didn't agree with him on some things, etc. But to have that discussion, like a really stimulating discussion with an author you admire, anybody you admire, a reader you admire, a person you like, in terms of like about a topic that we all love, like that's a great opportunity. So
Yeah, no, it was amazing. And what I do like too about those sorts of events is like the public talk and the on the books and all of that. Love it. It's amazing. It's so good. But it's actually also the dinners afterwards, right? Which like are necessarily small. So there is like that element of it, but I love being able to go myself, obviously, but also to take like a couple of like graduate students, and because that's when we're not talking about the author's book anymore. We're talking about all the things. Like you're meeting the author as the person, you're hearing their opinions on other stuff. It's like less formal. There's more space for like the students to sort of bring their ideas and thoughts in this way, and even to just like randomly bond over like basketball or something, right? Like it's just and it's great because like it's a different side to the author that you don't get usually at those public events, and so I love that aspect of it so much.
Yeah, and I've been to now a couple cons, and they're wonderful. Like the atmosphere, everything's, I mean, it's just incredible, right? And but of course, everyone's so busy, and it's such a big place. You can miss seeing people that even necessarily are hoping to meet up with or see, and there might be a panel discussion going on that you can't make work because of the schedule. And of course, the vast preponderance of people are meeting up in different areas and different locations, and so it's but yeah, those one-on-one chats, those more intimate settings are, I really like. That's like gold. Yeah, I really treasure that. So that's incredible. So congratulations on having the opportunity to do that, right? So that's
Thanks.
absolutely phenomenal. I do want to quickly ask you too, as we're winding down. So now you've been on booktube for a while. Obviously you were enjoying it, or else you wouldn't keep doing it. You find it worthwhile, or else you wouldn't keep doing it. What do you think? Where do you think your channel is going in the future? You think more of the same? I know it's hard to predict, but do you think that what you're doing now, more this, I consider it's like this you're doing this almost public facing scholarship, but yet it's fun and it's entertaining and you learn things, and like I always said, I have to give you this compliment, the same compliment I give to Philip. If I had profs like people like you and Philip University, I probably would have done better in school. but is that the future of where you're going? As you continue your academic life, you're going to continue your booktube life, and like where's the channel going, you think?
Well, I think so. I'll be doing like some, continuing of the same in the sense that I do really love bringing that sort of more academic lens in a way that hopefully is a little more accessible, outside of the academy, outside of the classroom, to people who aren't studying English literature and whatnot. So I definitely want to keep doing that. I do want to do more collaborations. Like it's I know I've done a couple, certainly with my own students, but then like also with David, and of course the stuff with Philip Chase, and Evan from Nerdwriter, and I love that. Like I find those so energizing, like this, like this, right? Like it's so energizing, right? To whether it's a more widespread discussion or whether you're focused on this one book that everyone's sort of like talking about. I love those. So I would really like to try to do some more of those, I think, for sure. And I do think, as much as I love Malazan, I do want to try to start bringing some other like fantasy texts in that I really love that I teach, and maybe I think I'm actually going to try. I think I'm going to lean in. I'm going to lean into the booktube thing and maybe start trying to do like term summaries of what I've read. Right, that's sort of my plan. Not, there's no way I could do it every month, but I think like for like the summer term, I have this sort of planned, and, like, the sort of angle on it though, which again, because I wanna, like, I don't I want people to have a reason, right, to read what I'm doing as opposed to, like, I don't wanna just reproduce what everyone else is doing, um, and expect people to care about it. But like, for me, I was thinking about it, like, I read for a lot of different reasons. And I think that would be interesting to be like, okay, here's the however many books I read, and I read this like because of this, and I read this for this, and to actually like dig into context of like why we read and like the various ways that sort of that comes into things. So I'm excited to do that. My first one at the end of this month.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, congratulations. Well, I can't wait to continue watching your channel and see you put this new content in there. I know it's always, I think, for a lot of booktubers, it's a struggle between, the stuff that, is very relatable and common. Like I think there's some common features of books too, like, the tags, right? The,
Yeah.
mid-year freakout tag, the, here's my monthly recap. Here's my top 10 series of all time. Here's my et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I think it's at the same time, I think there is a balance between, okay, the standard staples that people look for versus new and kind of engaging content, the long form stuff, the discussions, the yeah. But I think and I am looking forward to seeing simply just more videos from you, regardless of what they are. So
Well, thank
that's
you.
that's I'm very much looking forward to that. So um quickly, I just want to qualify that or comment about the whole professor thing. Totally user error. I think I was a horrible student in university, and I scraped through, and I got got grades not because I didn't have great professors. Some of my professors were wonderful. I think it's more just a fit thing for me. But I honestly feel like, and I mean this, just from I never got to know my professors the way I've got to know people like Philip Chase, and yourself. And I think maybe perhaps I didn't. Perhaps I was too caught up in the almost it's part of academia, like more that exclusionary academic jargon that like if I think I've had profs that broke things down a certain way, and I had a few. Those are the ones that I really really did well in their classes and related to, and I think people like you and Philip would have been one of them. So that's what I mean by you know
Yeah, well, no, I definitely didn't take it that way. Hopefully, no one watching would either. But I also think, like, I think when we were in our undergrad versus undergrad now, at least in Canada, like teaching styles have changed
yes,
radically,
yes,
right? And so I do think like back when if you were sort of in a class where it was more just straight up like lectures, you're sitting, you're expected to just absorb the
yeah,
knowledge that the expert is giving you, and there's no real place for you in that class, like until maybe you get to fourth year seminars, like
yeah,
sort of deal.
exactly.
And like that's a hard model for a lot of people. And I hate that model actually. I hate lecturing. Like it's not, I do it obviously because I have to provide like the context behind before we can get to the discussion. But I would never have a class without any discussion. Like it's very I think that's how people learn. Like you learn by talking through by and being guided in those discussions. Like that's where the quote unquote expert comes in. And I think that's an important function a university professor still plays. Like you set the reading list, you set, the context, you give them the necessary tools to understand what a metaphor is, and just like, all of these things. But then you like let them play with it in the classroom. And I think that that has really changed. Like that's not the way undergrad was for the most part when I
No,
was
I
there.
totally agree, and I've learned that vicariously through my kids who are recent graduates. That when I taught them about how school was for me, like going to very Hall University, York University, in this 500 to 800 person lecture hall where half the people are, and I'm dating myself here, back in the day, okay, they're just hitting record on their tape recorder for the lecture, and afterwards it's like you're basically just swapping notes, and then maybe in tutorial, if your tutorial is smaller than 30 people, you might be, at least first year, most people were too nervous to ask a question, even the TA, because it was a very different, for what, as you said, what my kids who were recent graduates describe as their university experience is very different from my. I felt mine was almost really sanitized, like my dim recollection of in my adult brain of what my university career was spent running back and forth to the library trying to get the microfiche thing to work, and just almost like feeling very detached, maybe. And part of it too may have been, in all fairness, when you go to a bigger school, right? Like one
Mhm.
thing I love about Laurier, one of the things I loved about my kids going to Laurier was that it felt so homey. It felt like a big high school, right? Just geographically, like I said, it's a square,
Yep.
and everything. You drive down University Avenue, everything's there. All the foods, the restaurant. You keep going, you get to Waterloo. Like it's very like and I just felt it was very 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 collegial and very very tight knit, and and I didn't go away like my kids all went away to Life University or wherever they went. Like I, stayed at home. I was Toronto born and raised, and it was a very different vibe, right?
Yep. Very much so.
So perhaps that's part of also too why I wasn't that. It was kind of like a means to an end, get the degree and get out, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
but yeah, like I said, but I do wish I had the opportunity to and I'm very grateful my kids did, to have that new style of learning and teaching that's going on now in our halls of higher learning. So it's good to hear. So and that says, oh, you got one more to subscribe, doctor. So
Thank you, Brad Miller.
fabulous, fabulous. Thank you, Brad. And yeah, 3 lives. Yep, 3 out of 4. Yeah,
Oh
I
wow, 4.
yeah,
Wild.
you know me, I'm a person of extremes. I'm cramming this all into one day, and then I'll just collapse after that and just sit in the corner and vegetate. So yeah, yeah, and yeah, old school. Yeah, well, the grades don't lie, my friend. So for sure. Listen, Erin, you've been so generous with your time. I don't want to keep you up. I want you to enjoy the rest of your lovely day. Thank you so much for being part of this. It's just been amazing. I've learned so much, and that's one of the reasons why I love watching your channel, because I do learn so much from you. You've been so gracious. Thank you. As we're signing off, would you mind telling people where they can follow you on social media, about your channel, where they can look you up, in terms of academically? If someone's thinking, okay, well, I'm thinking of going to school, in Manitoba, and maybe having a prof like you teaching them, like, anything you'd like to boost as we're
Yeah,
saying?
of course. And I mean, I want to say first though, like, thank you so much for having me on. Like, I've been looking forward to this since you reached out to me, and I loved the conversation we did around The Darkest Road, like Kay's book. So I was really happy after that, and just love your perspective on things. So it was very much enjoyed this. In terms of where to find me, so I'm at Dr. Rinnerung on YouTube, of course. I'm pretty sure that's my Blue Sky handle too. I'm terrible for remembering. Like, self-promotion is not my thing. That's something I have to get better at, I think, maybe. And certainly though, my faculty webpage is on the University of Manitoba website under our department, which is the Department of English, Theatre, Film, and Media at the university. And on there, there's like my research interests and like the type of theses that I supervise and like the type of classes I teach and whatnot. And I'm also currently graduate chair. So actually, if you are someone thinking of going to grad school for your MA or your PhD, reach out, because I'm always happy to talk to people about that. And if you want to study fantasy even somewhere else, I'm always happy to chat with people who want to bring together your love of reading fantasy or other speculative lit and academia.
Wow, that's fantastic. Well, I hope, I mean, all of my kids that have gone are through now, but you never know. There's grandkids. I have grandkids up there. So hopefully, as you're still teaching when they're getting to that stage, I can say, hey, good experience. Leave Ontario, go out west a bit and, check out U of M. Because I understand it's great school. So, and obviously they have great leaders and teachers such as you. So I'm sure that it's a great place to learn. So quickly on the shameless self-promo stuff for me, PL Stewart. All of the social media handles are at PL Stewart, right? So Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Blue Sky, all that stuff. The website is plstewart.com. The books you can find there. The YouTube channel is called The John King Saga, just like the series, which is here, where I get to interview spectacular creatives and people from the community, such as Erin. And I also do interviews under the Patreon umbrella. My wonderful colleague Taylor from Maybe Between the Pages on that. So check out those interviews as well.
Can I add one more really quick thing, which I
Of course,
totally forgot
absolutely.
about? Because this is actually something I don't think people know. A lot of academic writing in terms of articles behind paywalls, right? Which can be
Yes.
unfortunate, right? Some's open access, but not any. But if there is something you want to read, not always, but I would say 90% of the time, email the author. They will send you a copy, right? So if you ever are like looking up things and you find like this JSTOR thing and it's behind a paywall, check out the author, find their university address, and usually they will send you one happily, because we're just happy that people want to read what we wrote.
Wow, that's thank you for that. That's a great tip. And I will have to have you back in the future, because I didn't even get into academic writing, with you. We did, unfortunately we didn't get into, clearly, obviously. I mean, people, I think what happens is people forget is when you publish theses, those are published pieces of work that, anybody can normally go and look up and read, and beyond that, a lot of people in the scholastic world, write things like textbooks and research books and papers and all kinds of things that are fantastic. So we'll have to have you back to talk about. So I apologize, we didn't have time to get now to talk about your academic writing, that side, and perhaps how, and I'm not. And one thing I didn't get into is if you would ever write a fiction book, if you would ever, write even a fiction fantasy book, maybe. But
We'll
I'm
save it for
glad.
next time.
Yeah, perhaps I'm glad we didn't speak about that, because that's going to give us a lot to talk about next time. So, but once again, Erin, thank you so much for coming. You've been
Thank
absolutely
you, and
amazing.
thank those of you who, tuned in live and are watching this afterward. I very much
Yes.
appreciate it.
Thank you so much. You're what makes this type of long form content amazing. Long live long form content. So, Erin, I'll be signing off, and we will see you next time. Thanks so much, everyone. Take
See you,
care.
everyone.
Bye bye now.